Hey, this is the Xbox Dadcast. This is a podcast about the Xbox and upcoming Series X, specifically from the eyes of a casual gaming dad. We will also talk about just general gaming topics here as well as I see fit. I am Morgan, also known as Bond Diesel. I am an Xbox fanboy, PC semi-casual, Division 2 podcaster, husband to a lovely wife, and father to an adorable daughter. My first thing here will be to please, if you are interested in this subject, consoles in general, but especially the Xbox, share with your friends, share on Twitter, especially. I am at Xbox Dadcast. Drop a follow, and we'll go from there. On this week's episode, we will talk about the Inside Xbox gameplay impressions and the fallout after that, next gen info plan, Series X production potentially beginning. The console wars are on, and I'll give my thoughts on that, and we'll have a few listener questions. Okay, so we're going to jump right into the news. If you can see by my reaction, we had a Xbox Inside Xbox partner gameplay stream. So we knew this was coming for about a week. And it's interesting. My feelings while watching it, and then after watching it, and then now are all a little bit different. I'm going to go through each of the games that we saw. If you're watching the video, you see one of them right now, Bright Memory Infinite, which is actually available on PC right now, by the way. I think I believe it's like a 30-minute game, but still, it was a good, we'll talk about it. But okay, so the first game was Bright Memory Infinite. Basically, it is currently available as far as I can tell. It mostly seems like it was shown to be like a tech demo, and it looks like it'll be a cool little thing to fool with when the Series X comes out. Not a system seller, and I think that's going to be kind of the theme of this whole this show. And we'll talk about that. So the first game was Bright Memory Infinite. Looks like a cool little shooter, sword, whatever game. Most of these games were A or AA games. There was, I guess, 2 technical AAA games. But even then, is what it is. So they went from Bright Memory Infinite to Dirt 5. Racing games aren't really my thing personally. This one, it looked nice. It seems like they're taking advantage of some of that new raw horsepower, and that's cool. I think this kind of set off the whole trend with these games, where we're gonna see that there's gonna be some factors that we're gonna deal with, right? The first party games, they've basically promised that the Xbox Studio games are going to make their games multi-platform or cross-generational. I think for 2 years is what they said. And so that's just the way that's going to be. We won't see any first party games be Series X exclusives for 2 years. What I'm curious to, though, is how long it's going to be until we see a third party Series X exclusive, because I bet it isn't going to be that far away. Not as far away as you think. Probably not at launch, but I bet within probably by the end of 2021, you'll see a AAA Series X exclusive, or Series X and probably / PS5 exclusive. The only issue with that is that there will be, it's going to be really interesting. We'll talk about more of this later, but when they make those next gen exclusive games, it's going to be interesting and what they do with like the SSD speeds and stuff. So we saw Dirt 5. If you're watching, the broadcast, it's you see what I'm talking about. I mean, it looks fine. It's a racing game. Racing games don't sell systems the way they used to. These are not the days of Gran Turismo 1 and 2 anymore. Even early Forza, I think, was actually a pretty big game when they rebooted uh, Gran Turismo, yeah. So after Dirt 5, we saw Scorn, which is also currently showing. So apparently this game's been in development for 10 or more years. And there, if you look up on YouTube, there's actually gameplay from an alpha for this game, I think from 3 years ago. It's kind of like a sci-fi alien-esque shooter with some, if you're watching this, some highly sexual themes. I'm genuinely surprised they showed this at all on this Inside Xbox. I mean, right now I'm looking at a wiener. So if you haven't seen this trailer, it's for Scorn. And then there's this proboscis wiener thing with stuff dripping out, and then some robots in a missionary position, getting their crank on. I mean, it's a cool looking game. I thought it was like Warframe or something at first because of some of the aesthetic, and then it got real weird, and I stopped assuming it was Warframe. So, I mean, it seems interesting, I guess. I'll be kind of curious to what this means, but this isn't really my genre, to say the least. But if it stayed similar to its previous development, it's about it's a first-person shooter. In the alpha footage, the weapons you used were like organic weapons. And some of them, I think I remember them like ripping the weapons out of your enemies because they were like inside of them or something. Yeah. So Scorn, definitely an interesting thing. The next game I'm kind of actually a little more curious about than the other ones is Chorus. It's a space flight sim-ish type of game. It looks like, with even some kind of sci-fi, not just because it's space, but some type of kind of mystical element. The visuals look pretty good. We'll kind of talk about what we should really be expecting from the visual jump between this gen and last gen, but looks good. Looks like a cool game. It seems like this lady's talking to her spaceship, so that's where it gets kind of weird. But this was one that was more interesting, even though I still think these kind of flight sim / especially space flight games are still kind of similar to like racing games nowadays, where there's like a really dedicated fan base. But it's kind of a niche. A niche thing that people get into, and it's not really all that common. What's funny about it is here at the end of the trailer, there's a character that looks a whole lot like one of the Destiny 2 expansion characters. So I highly doubt they're related, but we'll see. And then we went into, and this is where I'm probably going to start deviating from the video. Then we had Madden 21. Oh, it's going to be on Series X. Blow my mind. I can't believe it. And they had Mr. Kermit the Frog himself presenting the announcement. What they failed to mention during this little segment, so they said, hey, yeah, there's going to be crossplay. If you buy Madden 21 on your Xbox One, you'll be able to do the smart enhancement or whatever. Actually, you won't do the smart enhancement. You'll just get a copy for your Series X, enhanced copy. But then what they quietly announced later on is that the only way you can do that is if you buy a Series X and you like claim your Series X version of Madden 21 by March of 2021. So it's a time limited deal. So if you buy Madden 21, or if you don't get an Xbox Series X until say like April of next year, you will have to buy Madden 21 again. This kind of deal is going to have to be very, very, very like highly criticized by gamers as we move to the Series X and the PS5 and so on, because I'm going to go on a tangent here again, but the thing about when they made the 360, so the original Xbox and the PS2 ran on x86 CPU architecture, which is the same as your laptop or your PC. And those games are actually technically compatible very easily because they can run off the same CPU architecture. When the next gen came out and it was 360 and PS3, the PS3 used the Cell CPU, which used a different type of CPU architecture only used by the PS3. And then the Xbox used the Easy PC, or I think that's what it was called, CPU architecture, which again was only them, was not the same as a PC or a laptop or something like that you would buy yourself. And because of that, when they I don't remember them actually porting any games from the Xbox or the PS2 to the PS3, except the PS3 did have the ability to play PS2 games at launch, and it was only the 60 gig, I believe. 60 and 20 maybe. There were versions. All I know is that years after the PS3 came out, you would have to pay a pretty penny for a PS3 that would play PS2 games, because I believe what they essentially did was that PS3 had a miniature PS2 inside it, basically, and that's how it would play PS2 games. But because of the different CPU architectures, they couldn't play natively. So then when the Xbox One and PS4 came out, they went back to x86 architecture. And so what happened was you had the typical architecture for the original Xbox and PS2, a completely, proprietary architecture for PS3 and Xbox 360, and then back to x86, the typical for the Xbox One and PS4, and they're staying with that x86 for PS5 and Xbox Series X and so on. And so the reason that it's so insane for them to charge you again for a game that works on the Xbox One, when they went from the 360 to the Xbox One, in theory, they had to port that game and make it work on a completely different architecture. And so charging for the new game, it essentially was it was a different game, different SKU, right? The problem is that between the Xbox One and the Series X, there's no reason to do that. There's no, in my opinion, acceptable excuse to charge people to play a game on the Series X that you already own on the One. When the Xbox One X came out and the PS4 Pro, I'm not aware of any games that charged people to get that 4K resolution. I was playing Division 1 a whole bunch, and that game had been out for a while, and its development was essentially over when the One X came out. And within, I want to say it was 6 to 9 months after the One X came out, the Division 1 put out a patch that would let you run Division 1 at 30 FPS, horribly, but in 4K, and it looked really good. It looked incredible. It was awesome. And they didn't charge for it. And I'm not aware of any Xbox One X enhanced game that you had to pay extra. You especially didn't have to buy the game again, because that's insane. So the problem is that moving from the One X or just the Xbox One in general to the Series X should be the same process. There's no reason for any company to charge extra. There's some argument that to make the games compatible with an SSD, which will probably take some work, and to make the games compatible with the, I guess, ray tracing. I don't think many existing games are going to do that, but if they do, there's some work obviously to put into it, but it's mostly a resolution bump and in a settings bump. So the fact that Madden, of course it's EA, is going to probably charge people potentially full price, at least an upgrade fee, quote unquote, is pretty insane. And I think any publisher who does that is going to need to get attacked heavily, and I'm sure EA will. I don't know how many people, all of the commentators, all of the gaming commentators were so stuck on the kind of mediocre presentation that EA thing hasn't gotten much attention yet, but it will. And when it does, you'll know it. After the Madden presentation, which looked like the same game it's always been, they had Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. This game is super funny because I remember the first game. I never played it, but I know people liked it. So I know people are excited about this sequel. The problem is it's a real hit or miss on how people felt about that announcement, because the people who liked the first game were pumped about a new one. The people who didn't care about it or didn't know about the first game were just ripping on how awful the graphics looked. And they do look really bad. Like they barely look acceptable for like an Xbox One, in my opinion. Now, this particular thing did bring up a subject I'm going to talk about later. But there was a person on Twitter who set a graphical comparison between Vampire the Masquerade 2 on Series X and The Last of Us 2 on PlayStation 4, not even the 5. So the problem with that comparison is that, one, we haven't seen any actual release. We don't have any release footage of The Last of Us 2 on any system because it's not out yet. The other issue is that that's a premier top 2 or 3 game for the Sony platform. So it's obviously going to look better than most other games. And last, Vampire the Masquerade 2 is going to look just as crappy on the PS5. It's just a crappy looking game. It's from I assume that's like a AA game, I guess, is what you would call that. So that comparison's kind of rough, but because they decided to put it into this trailer, they invited that comparison. So if you're into that, there you go. The next game was Call of the Sea, which it's a adventure first-person shooter, I guess, first-person perspective game. That the trailer had kind of a feeling of like Firewatch or The Long Dark to me, which I like both of those games. So that seems like it'll be pretty cool. And the nice thing about that is that it's supposed to be on Game Pass on release. A few of these games were like that, and that was actually kind of exciting. The next game was The Ascent, which I think was the game that I actually walked away the most excited about. So it's like a top-down shooter type of game that seemed like kind of like a Cyberpunk plus Diablo. This is the one I was the most excited about. The aesthetic was cool. Just the way it played just looked like it was kind of chunky, kind of meaty, which is how I like my games. And that's the one I'm actually the most excited about. So definitely check that one out. The next one is actually, I've caught up here to the video, is The Medium. So it had kind of a weird kind of sci-fi thriller horror type of feel to it. It reminded me kind of like the Upside Down in Stranger Things. You have a lady who's pregnant and they're scanning her belly. And then in the trailer, it's showing her going from like the normal world to this weird burning crazy looking world. If it reminds me of like the type of games where it's the idea of because she was pregnant, she's in between two different worlds. So I'm kind of curious about that one. The thing is about the trailer is I don't know if it's like a first person game, if it's a third person game. I don't know if it's a point and click adventure. So, that kind of came down to some of the other criticisms of this whole show is we didn't see any actual gameplay from it, but it did look kind of cool. The next game they showed us was... actually, as I say that, now they are actually showing some gameplay of, I forgot about that, The Medium. So it looks like it's going to be a third-person kind of adventure game where, your perspective from the real world to the crazy, scary, Bernie world goes back and forth. That actually looks pretty damn cool. Then there was Scarlet Nexus. So here's the way I'm going to describe this and the best I can for how it affects me. And this is what I wrote on my notes. Some Bandai Namco shit that makes no sense to me. So this is probably a big deal for people who care about it. It looks kind of neat, I guess. One thing that was funny about this trailer is it in the corner it said gameplay as Series X is expected to look. So I assume they didn't have like a Series X like development box to record this footage on. So they set the computers to basically probably be similar to what the Series X will show. I don't know. This game, it's got some like plant monsters and some anime characters chopping them up. If that's your deal, awesome. That's super cool. Not mine, so I'll just move on. The next game they're gonna show is Second Extinction. It's a dinosaur shooting first person shooter with lots of graphic dinosaur dismemberment. It kind of like a Turok type of thing. That's what I thought it was when the trailer was showing. I don't know. It looks like it's gonna be some kind of AA, single A, shallow game that you'll buy for $15 and play for 20 minutes. But I guess it showed off some graphical prowess, sort of, kind of. Then we came to the last two games, which I would say are the true like AAA experiences we got. The Yakuza Like a Dragon. I've never played these games. It's not my jam, but I do know they're a big deal. I believe this game is either already out in Japan or is already. I think the big deal about this is the fact that it's going to be on the Series X first for the next gen, like graphics and stuff. But I think Xbox has been trying to dig into the Japanese market for a really long time, and so I suspect this is one of their kind of slight attempts at something like that. But if you're into that, there you go. Should be fun. And then we finished up the show with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So the day before, they dropped a trailer the week before or whatever, they dropped a trailer, said, hey, during the Inside Xbox show, you're going to see the first next-gen gameplay of Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Awesome. Sounds super fun. Then that came at the end of the show, and it was, I don't know, a minute of quote unquote gameplay, where it was mostly trailer stuff that we had seen before, plus a very short, small amount of, I guess, gameplay shot from like a cinematic angle. It didn't really look that good. If you want me to be totally honest, I wasn't super impressed by it. And this one's interesting because, for full clarity, I was a Ubisoft 2018 star player, and I was able to go to E3. I did it for The Division. I was a big fan of The Division 1, was very active with doing things on social media and streaming and podcasts like this, obviously. And I love Ubisoft. I think they do a lot of really great things. Unfortunately, they also don't learn from mistakes very well, and they have a habit of doing the same things over and over again. And what I would throw out is that this whole deal with the Assassin's Creed Valhalla trailer being kind of underwhelming, I think has a lot to do with the fact that this was some Ubisoft shit, if you want my honest opinion, where it was like, they're like the kings of hype. They are so good at hype. They love hype. Their hype game is almost second to none. The problem is that their follow-through game typically isn't. From being a big Division 2 fan as well, they basically always have something big and new coming, and almost every time that the announcement comes, it's not really that exciting, and that's what happened here. I'm sure Valhalla is going to be great, but I really think that if this Valhalla trailer at the end of this would have been even like 5 minutes of actual gameplay, of perspective of the player running through, a short part of a mission and culminating with something really cool, it probably would have saved this whole presentation. People still would have been like, a lot of those games didn't really look next gen, but I still think it would have ended on like oh cool, that looks great. Instead, it turned into, what, we saw that trailer already. Like, and then, yeah. So my thoughts on it, I mean, the kickback on this has been that it was kind of the first oof of the Series X reveal, right? It started off, they've been doing really well. I think for the whole last year, basically, of presenting information really well and doing things the right way. The problem is that they kind of overhyped this a bit. They have apologized since and said, hey, we know you guys expected more. We'll learn from that and make sure that the following shows, maybe hit expectations a little better. I don't think they needed to apologize. It was fine. There was some cool stuff in this. It's just if they wanted the first look at the next gen to really get people hyped, this maybe should have just been yeah, we're going to show some stuff instead of it's the first next gen, that kind of set, I think, the wrong expectation. And it definitely didn't deliver. So, it's fine. I mean, I'm excited about it. So, we'll go from there. But I think Valhalla there at the end, we really could have used seeing some Cyberpunk. We could have really used seeing some other third-party games that, for me, with Assassin's Creed, I wish that Ubisoft would have taken a moment to do a quick reel of all the games that they have that are going to have Series X patches. So for me, I'm super biased here, but show me that we're going to get a Division 2 Series X patch. Show me that we're going to get Rainbow Six Siege patch. Show me this and show me all these other games. For heaven forbid we get a Breakpoint Series X patch, but I hope we do for the people who care about that game. But that would have been great. And even just to see that in general, if they would have done a 30-second thing at the end, just quickly showing little screenshots of all the different games that we're going to get in Series X, that would have been so cool. And that's not what we got. So kind of an oof. We'll wait for, I'll be excited for June. I hope that they learn their lesson from this one, and we'll go from there. So the next big subject we had this week was their announcement of the next generation announcement schedule. So in a Xbox blog, they revealed that there's going to be a new Xbox 2020 show, 20/20. It was very clever, I think. To reveal the rest of the information about the system and the games and all that, and every month until launch. It sounds like the big one is going to be July, where they're going to do, that's going to be the show for the first party Xbox studios. So we'll probably get our first glimpse of what Halo Infinite actually is. We'll probably get some more Hellblade 2 footage and hopefully gameplay. And I would say there's going to be a bunch of stuff from all these studios that we're going to see more of. If they can have cool gameplay from Infinite, Halo, something cool from Hellblade, and 2 things that we don't know about yet that get people super hyped, that's a successful show. So that sounds like it's the one to be really excited about. We'll have to wait and see. I'll absolutely be covering it. And then the last bit here, I think may actually play into why we didn't see Cyberpunk during this partner show. Maybe, we'll see. A tweet was sent out stating that the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077 would be on Xbox Game Pass. And this was according to the Xbox Portugal official account. They after that deleted it and said it was a mistake and said the tweet was supposed to be about the Cyberpunk Xbox controller. That gives me a big turn of the head and kind of confused eyes. So this can go multiple ways, right? It genuinely was a mistake, or Microsoft is going to drop some fat cash to CD Projekt Red, some fat cash, and say, hey, we want to have your giant super anticipated game on Game Pass, and people can pay a few bucks a month to play it all they want. That would be a system selling move, in my opinion. The only issue I have is that this is gonna, if they do it when it comes out, it will be after it'll be before the Series X comes out. So you kind of run into a weird thing there where if Cyberpunk doesn't come out the same time as the Series X, then you don't really get that system selling thing from something like this. I don't know. I am more hopeful that this may actually happen than I think a lot of people are or should be. This isn't going to happen, right? But I'm going to hold out hope until it doesn't. Okay. So getting into some speculation and the opinion part of this all. So the Inside Xbox response, I think that show was what they said it was going to be. If you go back and look at their announcement of it, it said there'd be some gameplay, which there was, and some sneak peeks and things like that. The way that they actually presented this show, if you read that and then watch the show, it fit, right? They weren't saying that. They weren't hyping it up as much as, you know, people were, maybe Ubisoft did, and so on. And because of that, I think that there was a bit of overhype with it. Now, that said, it is still one of the first events of the next gen. And even if they didn't overhype it, they still had to have realized that this was like a big moment for a lot of people who pay attention to this stuff. But what I will say, and I think what people need to keep in mind, is that there's a large number of people with large voices who literally have like careers built on waiting for these type of moments. I love the dudes, but like a channel like Layman Gaming, who is like kind of skill ups. I guess some people would call it a news channel. I consider it a comedy channel that kind of gives some news and has a pretty strong bias in ways. You don't pretend you don't play Uber driver for a bunch of Sony first party devs and then act like that you don't have any bias, in my opinion. But this show was basically perfect for people who were looking for Xbox to have a misstep, because from a kind of objective point of view, it was okay, right? But from a critical point of view, or like if you're looking for a mistake to be made, you can say like, oh, hey, look, Xbox sucks. All their games blow. Look how awful this presentation was. You know, so I think that gets to a weird spot where I think people can be a little kind of cross-eyed about it with like, well, you're still talking about it because there's nothing to talk about from the other side right now. But, you know, that just kind of is what it is. I don't think the show was awful. It could have been worse, I promise. It was probably the best Inside Xbox they've ever done. Like, that's the funny thing about it, is that compared to all of the other ones, it was incredible in my opinion. But it didn't quite bring the pain the way they needed to. And the June, July, I assume an August one, probably a September one, needs to make sure that they either clarify what it's going to be really well or really bring the hype, especially because I think this was the last thing Xbox was going to do basically without an answer from PS5. They might get their June Inside Xbox out before PS5 does their first big thing, but I doubt it. And I think that this was their chance to, like, I think that this should have been their first party show, because before Sony has really given us any more big information, they could have had that spotlight before Sony was able to. And then they could have reinforced that spotlight as time went on. But instead they gave us a bunch of single and double A games. So is what it is, I guess. Okay. There are some rumors right now. I was kind of seeing people talk about that the Series X is already in production, which it should be. That makes complete sense, because especially if their availability numbers are going to be as good as they seem to think they will be, they have to start production now. I mean, the hardware on these things has probably been finalized for a year, right? I'm sure that they've known like what was going to be in the system for a while. So It wouldn't surprise me at all. And we'll have to kind of, just wait and see if they make any like official announcements. They may show the first, actual production Series X in a tweet or something. The on kind of in that vein, there's some rumors also going around that the Lockhart or the Series S may not be around for a while. That's kind of what I've predicted for a while. I think if there is a Series S or a different model, a different SKU of the new Xboxes, I would expect it to probably not come out until like late 2021. I think that they will try to give the Series X a whole year of some type of exclusivity, but that's just my guess. And then the final thing before I get to the listener questions is there's a lot of quote unquote console war conversations happening right now, and a lot of commentary on console war conversations. And I think that they need to, there can be fun. I'm gonna poke fun at PS5 a little bit here and there, but my actual opinion is that obviously PS4 Sony just slaughtered Xbox in the current gen. And the reason I think that's worth talking about is because I think that's really bad for video games, for PC players even, right? Because Sony was able to kind of get lazy in a way and not have to innovate and be able to be the last one up to talk about things like crossplay and things like that. Because who are they competing with? They're not competing with Nintendo, even though Nintendo's blowing them out of the water too, because they're just murdering everyone. Because the Switch is like its own thing. But they didn't even have to like worry about Xbox basically in this gen. They just, Xbox set themselves up so badly at the beginning or during the announcement phase, and then never really recovered by having the expensive system with the Kinect, by the stupid DRM announcement, even though they rescinded it, the damage was done. The always online stuff, the same thing. And then the game issue, Halo 5 not being that great and, not having very many system seller games. I would argue that Gears 5 is actually in that category, even though it's not a game I care about. But, there wasn't a console war this gen. It was, PlayStation, wiped the floor with them, on top of the fact that they have all these first parties that are incredible. But what, at the end of the day, for me, like, I hope that Xbox does a lot better. One, because I like the Xbox, I like the controller more, I like the ecosystem more. That's just my preference. But especially because if Sony actually has competition this time, they're going to have to push a lot harder and not kind of rest on their laurels the way I think they kind of are right now. I think the perfect evidence is how they've announced the PS5 so far, by essentially not, other than some kind of weird tactics that they've used. So, so don't get involved. It's so weird. Like, I've tried to start paying attention to other like Xbox creators and stuff like that, and literally, it seems like all of them spend way more time quote tweeting PS5 fans and starting drama than just talking about the dang system. And that's a bummer, because there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about. And if you're a PS5 hater or whatever, they don't have a lot to talk about. So just let them be sad or whatever. I don't know. I'm not probably going to buy a PS5, but I hope it does really well, because I hope it pushes Xbox to keep doing well. And the last thing I'll say on this little subject is nothing, though, in my opinion, about the console wars is nearly as cringy as the PC Master Race stuff. There was an admittedly kind of funny post today by the PCMR Twitter account, where it was joking about, SSDs come in like 9 years late or whatever to the systems. My issue with the whole PC Master Race thing is I have a nice PC. I'm very happy with it. I can play basically anything right now and play at pretty good specs. I still prefer console just because of the ease and for lots of reasons. But I think that there sometimes is a little bit of like an arrogance from the PC. I think that stuff is way worse because it's to me like an inferiority complex. Because I hope most PC players realize that if the consoles didn't exist, the gaming landscape would be rough because there's not too many companies that are going to be able to make a profit and stay open only making games for PC. Obviously, there's a few who do really well, games that are primarily PC or only PC, but not very many. It's very few. And the gaming landscape would be much more bleak if it depended 100% on computer, PC players. So, there's always going to be that crowd that's well, I can make a $500 PC that's better than any Xbox or PlayStation. At the end of generations, that's absolutely true. I definitely don't think that's going to be true for the Series X and PS5, at least not for a while, especially with these SSDs and stuff. But even if it is true, the thing is that just has to be realized is, PC players should be begging for the consoles to be even better than they've ever been, especially Xbox, because they actually put their games on PC. PlayStation supposedly is going to. I'll believe it when I see it. Supposedly Horizon, maybe I think God of War maybe is rumored to be coming. I'll believe it when I see it. It'll probably happen, but PC players should be rooting for Xbox real hard, at least in my opinion. Okay, we will jump into a couple questions here. The first one is from Shami Soul on Discord. If you want to ask questions, you can ask them on the Twitter account at Xbox Dadcast or at Bondiesel. You can also ask in the YouTube or in my Discord. Shami Soul says, a good show today. If you turn an eye on that quote unquote gameplay that they had on the title, that said, did you like what you saw? Did any of the games pique your interest? I personally like The Ascent, Bright Memory, and Scarlet Nexus. So The Ascent for sure. I was Chorus, the space shooter. I'd be willing to keep an eye on. And The Medium and Call of the Sea, I would say are the ones. But The Ascent is definitely the one I'm the most kind of curious about. The second part of Shami's question was, what can be done to do better in their next show in June and July for first party baby? I think June is actually probably going to be a hardware focus, is my guess. They haven't said that, so I'm guessing. But my assumption is they're gonna do a deep dive on the system, on the controller, maybe some other peripherals. There's rumors of like a headset and some other stuff. Talking about maybe how things from the Xbox One are going to work on the Series X and vice versa. Maybe even some more talk about, the cross-generational stuff that has been a bit convoluted for people. I think June is going to be a deep dive on the system, which I think is fine. But my guess is that they're going to take an L in June. I bet PS5 is going to have some huge announcements, and then you're going to have all of the other leftover E3 talk that would have happened during E3 from Ubisoft and EA and Activision. All these companies are going to have their shows. So, I suspect that June may be a focus on stuff that we mostly already know, maybe some new info, because they know that they're probably going to get drowned out. But then July, like I said before, I think July needs to be maybe a sort of deep dive on Hellblade, a sort of deep dive on Halo Infinite, a sort of deep dive on probably a new Gears game and Forza. And then I think that there need to be a couple games that just people are like, what? You're doing that? Like, whether or not it's like a Perfect Dark, or if it's, some other reboots, Fable, I think would be a big one. They need to really show something about Everwild. It's getting compared to the Zelda game, the Breath of the Wild. If it's really something like that, they need to show it. And because I'll be super hyped about that. That game's aesthetic looks so cool to me. So that's what I think July needs to be to kind of regain the hype. And then the second question was from Jernsum NL, my Netherlands friend on Discord. I'm pretty sure. What is your dream job? So if I were to say gaming, like gaming wise, my dream job, At this point, I honestly don't know, because a few years ago I would have said to be like a community manager for like a gaming platform like Xbox or something, or even for a game specifically. I always wanted to be a Division 2 community dev. But then now, a few years later, watching how all of that really seems to be, and after having conversations with a lot of people who do that, not just for Division, but mostly for Division, no, thank you. My dream job would maybe to be like a story writer, like to write like narrative in games. I think that'd be kind of fun. My concern is that I am not creative enough to do that. If I ever got into that, it would definitely be, I don't want to say like an encyclopedic knowledge of military things, but I have a significant interest in like military and wars and just military tech in general, especially in the World War II area, but even in the modern day. I just think that stuff is so cool. And I think writing stories involving that stuff, even if they're fiction, I still think would be a lot of fun. So if I had to pick a dream job in gaming, it would probably be like narrative, because don't want to be a comm dev. I'm too dumb to do the programming. I don't want to be a streamer or a YouTuber full time. That's a nightmare. You have to sell your soul for that shit. I've determined at this point, you can't. It's no way. Maybe being a full time podcaster, maybe that would be my dream. But yeah. So, but otherwise, I don't know. I feel like not in the salary department, but basically in every other one, I kind of have my dream job. I'm a social worker. I'm gonna kind of leave it at that. But I help people. People thank me. They seem that, they like what I do for them. I get to pick my own hours. Essentially, I get paid well enough to have a nice living for myself and my family. I don't know. Other than that, I wanted to be a cop for a long time, but that stuff's gotten too crazy. I'm no, thank you. And I'm a little too chubby for that these days. I always kind of wanted to be a teacher, but my wife is a teacher. And after hearing her stories, I would want to be a teacher for the wrong reasons, because in my brain, I would only be teaching kids who want to learn and care about what I'm saying. And since that's not the reality, hard pass. Other than that, I think maybe I would like to get a degree at some point where I can do like, I work for a nonprofit right now, so I've considered getting a master's in business and potentially having kind of like a larger impact on some nonprofit or something like related to what I do now in some capacity. But we'll have to wait for that. But thanks for the questions. I do appreciate it. Like I said, feel free to ask your own, and I always do try to reach out for those questions. And that's where we're going to wrap this show up. So if you listened all the way through, thank you very much. Please take a moment to rate this podcast on whatever platform you are listening to it. If you're on YouTube, please leave a comment. Give me some of your thoughts or your feedback. If you want to support this show, or my other content, please check out patreon.com/theechocast. Supposedly I stream. Gonna try to jump on tomorrow if I have time, but it's Mother's Day, so I gotta be careful. And that's over on twitch.tv/bondiesel. You can also catch me on Twitter as @bondiesel or @Xbox Dadcast. That's what I have this week. Until we meet again, be good and game on.